Hello.
Did you go down for it? Have you been down to your house for it?
No, he went before. I didn't.
Are you going down
April.
now, or there's a whole big chunk between this meeting and the next meeting?
No, there's a whole bunch of stuff happening in April. End of April. We have three. Birthdays.
The Tuesday, March 15th, 2022 meeting of the Eden Prairie City Council is now called to order. Please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Just have a brief announcement about Open Podium. Open Podium is an opportunity for Eden Prairie residents to address the City Council on issues related to Eden Prairie City government prior to each council meeting, which typically are held the first and third Tuesday of each month. These open podiums are held from 6:30 to 6:55 here in the council chamber. If you wish to speak at Open Podium, please contact the City Manager's office at 952-949-8412 by noon of the meeting date with your name, phone number, and subject matter. If time permits, after scheduled speakers are finished, the mayor will open the floor to unscheduled speakers. Open Podium is not recorded or televised. If you have any questions about Open Podium, please do contact the City Manager's office. Mr. Getcho, we have several presentations, donations.
We do, Mayor. Thank you. I'm going to hand this over to Mr. Lothammer. He's going to cover all three of the donations and then the presentation.
Great.
Your Honor, council members, the first item is a donation from Elaine Sampson towards the Art Center. And as many of you recall, in 2008, the Sampson family donated the Art Center to the city of Eden Prairie. And so since then, we've been operating it as a public arts center. Mrs. Sampson's commitment to making this an incredible place for our community and for people to come and enjoy and learn about art has never wavered from the beginning. And this is another contribution from her to help us improve and to add more equipment at the Art Center. So we would like to thank her for her continued support and acknowledge it by accepting the resolution.
I just want to say, too, this is a really significant amount, but if my memory holds correct, is it the fourth or fifth? The family's been so generous over the last several years. So
on a very regular basis.
I know as a city we appreciate it, but anyone that frequents the Art Center has to be unbelievably impressed and thankful and filled with gratitude. So thank you so much.
Absolutely.
Council, a motion.
Move to adopt the resolution accepting the donation in the amount of $10,000 from Elaine Sampson to go towards Art Center equipment and programs.
Is there a second?
Second.
Any discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed. Mr. Lothammer.
Yes, Your Honor, another regular contribution and another group that contributes to the city in many, many different ways, but on an almost annual basis, the Lions Club has come forward to support the outdoor center at Starring Lake, and sometimes this has been used for binoculars or microscopes or things that can really help us continue to carry out a quality program there. So we really appreciate their efforts in all of the areas in our community, but tonight we want to recognize $700 from the Lions Club to the outdoor center.
Thank you. And as a Lion myself, I will say that they raise money throughout the year at events, and 100% of their dollars raised goes back into the community. And I believe the next opportunity to contribute is a pancake breakfast coming up. I wish I knew the exact date. Do you know it?
No, it's in April, though.
But do go out on their website and find out, and please attend that. Or I guess, see me for tickets. I don't know if I'm allowed to say it. No, it's for a good cause, right? So is there a motion to accept? I think I could do that. Go ahead, Councilmember Freiberg, go ahead and make the motion if you would.
Okay. I move to adopt a resolution accepting the donation of $700 from Eden Prairie Lions Club for outdoor center equipment.
Is there a second?
I'll second.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Mr. Lotthammer.
Quick note, Mayor, sorry. I don't want to put you on the spot because you're a Lions member, but it's this Saturday. The event is...
That's the fish fry for Let's Go Fishing.
Right.
No, he's
What's the
talking
pancake
about the
breakfast?
I
pancake
think it's up in
breakfast.
April on a Sunday. I just don't have it in my...
Oh, well, the fish fry is more important.
Okay. Go out on their website and find out all the great activities they do to raise funds, and they give it all away. So that's the cool part of the Lions Club, of many parts that are cool of the Lions Club. All right, Mr. Lotthammer.
Your
proceed.
Honor, council members, this is fast becoming an annual tradition and one that we certainly don't take for granted and want to continue to work hard to hopefully be recognized as. But there are two awards that we're going to present to you tonight. And I want to turn this over to our community center manager, Valerie Verley, to tell you about them, and especially to her because she has played a large role in the success of the community center and the public perception of that, but also she oversees our aquatics area and lifeguards, and that plays a strong role over at Round Lake in the operation of the splash pad along with our park maintenance staff. I think a lot of that credit goes to them. So I'm going to turn it over to Valerie, and then at the end we'll ask Mayor Case to come down and have a picture and accept the awards.
Thank you, Jay. Your Honor, council members, it's my honor to present to you the Sun Current 2022 Reader's Choice Awards for the Best Recreational Center. That's been awarded to the Eden Prairie Community Center, and then also the Best Water Park for 2022 awarded to the Round Lake Splash Pad. This is actually the 7th year in a row, I'm proud to say, that the Community Center has received the recognition for Best Recreational Center. This is a voter-driven process for the Reader's Choice Awards. So that feels extra rewarding to know that it came right from the voters in the community of Eden Prairie, but also the regional poll at large. The splash pad's always had high usage since its opening at Round Lake, but saw a significant uptick, as I'm sure many of you saw or heard during the pandemic. And it's actually its 2nd year receiving this award, as I said, and we continue to see high usage numbers there, which is great. And then the community center being recognized as the best recreational center, these past 2 years really means even more than all the ones before. I think our staff and our department have worked really hard during the pandemic with social distancing changes, mask mandates, some closures, which we never had to do before that time, and it just really makes it even sweeter to be receiving it from the voter recognition these last 2 years. So it's incredibly rewarding, as I mentioned, to have our facility held in such a high regard and continue to be recognized for that. And it's my honor to present these to you tonight if Mayor
Great.
Case would come down.
Sure. I just want to say something that during the COVID years, the two of them, the community center probably took the most, I don't know if you want to call it a hit, but the most impact. Negatively challenged. Thank you so much. Give me words, yeah. Truly, and I just can't say enough good about what you did and the staff, and just to keep it going the best that we could, and then to bring it out into the light again. I hope that things are fast getting back to normal. So thank you for all the hard work during this troubling, difficult time. So appreciate all you did and your staff.
Thank you very much.
It's always nice to win awards, and I know Councilmember Narayan is always wanting us to be number one. I do. We all want us to be number one, but you particularly want to find out if we're number one. So this is an exciting night for you again. We are so often number one, and I think so deserving.
Thank you for the great service.
All right, let's see. We now are going to, it's not in the agenda, but we had requested this earlier. Several of us, in fact, probably all of us, I haven't talked to you for open meeting law, but I talked to Kathy Nelson, and two of us at least have been getting some handful of calls about the assessments. I'm pretty sure all five of us have heard about that. And so I talked to Mr. Getcho, and we thought it'd be a good idea to have our city assessor come in and present, and then give us an opportunity to ask a few questions, clarifying on behalf of our residents. So do you want to introduce
Absolutely. No, Mayor. Thank you. That was an excellent intro. It's been a very, very busy couple weeks for the assessment team at the city. It's been an uncommon year as past years. So John Thompson, our city assessor, is here to provide a brief overview of the 2022 assessments that'll be affecting 23 taxes, and answer any questions you may have.
Great, thank you. Welcome. How long have you been in your new position as well? I guess it's not that new, but
In my current position.
in your current position.
Since August. I've been with the city for about 8 years.
Okay,
Yep.
Great.
And in assessing for 11, and in the real estate profession for about 20.
wow, you don't look that old, but please continue.
Thank you. Good evening, Mayor Case and council members. Thank you for that introduction, Rick. So I just wanted to start with giving some information on just the overall assessment. Obviously, we've been inundated with questions. This is what's been described as historical, unprecedented growth in the real estate market, primarily in the residential real estate market. In my 20 years working in real estate, this is definitely far and away the most growth we've seen in 1 year in residential real estate valuation. So happy to have the opportunity to come and hopefully clear up some of the details as to how we're setting these assessments and how property value and sales in the market impact the assessed value that was just mailed to over 20,000 parcels. We'll just start off with just kind of some background of overall assessment process, basic information, which really applies statewide for the most part. The most important thing is that all these market values that are estimated for each property in the city is based on recent market sales, so sales of similar and comparable property. This current 2022 assessment increase is a direct result of where the current real estate market is. Eden Prairie experienced similar growth as most of the surrounding communities, very consistent throughout the state of Minnesota and most national markets as well. So we aren't necessarily an outlier by any means, and I'll get into some of the comparisons to our neighboring counties as well. For the most part, everything we do is guided by statute. The Department of Revenue is our oversight committee. And so they interpret statute, they provide guidance and training to assessors statewide, and also oversight of the assessment quality on the individual jurisdiction and county levels. So the whole point of the statistical measures is to ensure statewide equity, uniformity in the assessments. And then we also adhere to assessment profession standards. All City of Eden Prairie appraisal staff are members of the Minnesota Association of Assessing Officers. They offer additional coursework and training to make sure that we are valuing property ethically, responsibly, and equitably. Another important note is the assessment date is as of January 2nd. Everything leads up to that date, January 2nd, so although it is a process that goes on throughout the year, that January 2nd date is the focal point of valuation, and that's throughout the state of Minnesota. So a little bit about Eden Prairie. Statistically, we have 22,824 active parcels. That includes every active parcel. Just over 20,000 of those are residential in nature. 738 would be commercial, industrial, or multifamily, and the rest is miscellaneous properties. So you have exempt properties, state assessed properties such as utility and railroad. The state Department of Revenue has a wing that actually handles the assessment for those properties.
A quick question. I was wondering, where did you get my house's picture there?
That is actually a property on Cavallo Ridge that some might be familiar with. It's the highest sale in Eden Prairie in quite some time. It sold for $5.3 million in February of 2021. So that is in this current period of sales that we're studying to set 2022 values.
Thank you.
So being that we're valuing so many properties as of one date each year, and then every year we're putting a new value on those properties, we aren't putting together individual reports or appraisals on those properties. That's a much more time-consuming process. Anybody who's recently purchased or sold a property is probably aware of the appraisal process. But I would say that we are pretty darn accurate as to if you were to have an appraisal done in total, what that assessed value would compare to an appraised value. And the way that we're accomplishing that is utilizing that industry-wide standard of computer-aided mass appraisal. It's, for the most part, residential properties across the nation for assessment purposes are going to be valued in this way. It's the process that is ongoing of collecting data, updating data on existing properties, analyzing sales and market information throughout the year, inputs into the system, and so you can accurately apply those rates on the back end to individual properties. So the state of Minnesota, all sales that were used in setting 2022 assessed values occurred between October 1 of 2020 and September 30th of 2021. That's known as the sales ratio study or the 12-month study, and that is set forth by the state of Minnesota. So if you're using different months, you might come out with different numbers. In the state of Minnesota, that is a statewide date or period in time. Every year, we grab sales from that time period to set upcoming assessments. So just a simple example is if the property was valued at $430,000 for assessed value purposes, that property sold for $450,000, you'd have the sales ratio of 95.6. So it's a level of the assessment compared to a market sale.
And we have to be within a certain delta there. There's a range, correct? Like, is it 5% or something?
The statewide standard is within 90 and 105%. So your total sales sample between that time period, in Eden Prairie was over 1,400 sales that I'll cover later in a little more detail. That entire sample has to be within 90 and 105% sales ratio as a median standard.
Is there a penalty for us if we're not within that 15%?
Yes, the assessment would then be overridden. The Department of Revenue would step in and have to correct that assessment if you're outside of those parameters. That's dictated by statute. And we take it a step further. Most assessing officers, definitely in Hennepin County, for countywide equalization, we're targeting that 95 to 96%. So not at 100, not even at the midpoint of the range, which would be 97.5. We're going towards that lower end of 95% in total.
So one more question. So do we track, let's say in Eden Prairie in 2021, X amount of houses sold, do we look at it, the sold price versus what the assessed value is, and are we in actual the 95% range?
Correct. It's not going to be on every individual sale that we're going to hit the 95%. It's the volume of properties in total. Another important thing is there is statistical standards that are used as a measurement. So we cannot go to a sale price on every property. So every property that recently sold, we can't just go to the sale price. We have to treat all properties the same. So as we're going up and down and setting the overall assessment, for the most part, most properties went up and down within a range, and we're going to meet that median in total at just over 95% typically. Maybe on the lower end or higher end of that 95 to 96, depending which way the market's going.
So the most of the cases, we will be under the sold price or under the real value, around 95%.
In a majority, it is a time-adjusted study, which I'll get into a little more detail. So you have to take that into consideration. Those sales have to be adjusted to the assessment date. But because we're targeting 95, it is a median. Half are going to be over, half are under. But because it is a median that is used and we're targeting 95, a majority would be under 100% of market value, in theory.
Okay.
Market value, of course, is somewhat subjective. Markets aren't perfect, so there's a little bit more nuance to it. But statistically speaking, we would be under 100% of market value of all of our sales.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome. The next part of that is that these sales must be time adjusted, that we touched on a little bit there. That is a mandate that's also statewide. The trend is determined by analyzing a 21-month study. So if you take that 12-month study, go back to January of 2020, that sets the 21-month study. That is used to analyze the market conditions adjustment, if you will, or time adjustment. Every sale being adjusted to the assessment date. And this will just get a little bit more into detail on that. You can see the calculation is there displayed. Simply what's done is a linear regression analysis of all sales in that 21-month study after they remove outliers. The trend for the city of Eden Prairie this year is 12.8% on all residential property. So every sale occurring in that 12-month study that we have to base our 22 assessment on must be adjusted to January 2nd of 2022 using this calculation by about what it equates to is 1.07% per month. And a simple example here is that same house before with the direct ratio of 95.6 sold at the beginning of the study period, October 1 of 2021, for that same price of $450,000. After adjusting it to the assessment date of 1.07 per month, the adjusted sale price is $523,100. That by state requirement is what we have to target for our ratio study. And that is, again, a statewide. Different jurisdictions are applied different trends based on the statistical significance of their study. And if there is statistical significance within that jurisdiction, we are applied a straight trend off our 21-month study. If not, you may default to the county's region or so on, metro. So taking that $450,000 house, that sale that was adjusted to the assessment date, that touches on a little bit where just your market growth that's being reported might differ from assessment growth. For example, that property that had the 95.6% ratio in our previous example before we time adjusted it, if that was the 2021 assessed value of $430,000, it would have that 95.6% direct ratio. But after factoring in for that time adjustment that is mandated, you would have to adjust that value for the 2022 assessment to $500,100 to be at that same 95.6% ratio, accounting for that time trend. This results in an assessment year-over-year growth, just comparing the 21 assessment to the 22 assessment, of 16.3%. So when you factor in that time trend, it doesn't necessarily equate exactly to that 12.8% annual trend. So further analyzed by property type, you can see I have it listed. Single family, we break it out a little bit more because we have statistical significance in these segments to do so. So what we're applying for single family in our assessment analysis is 14.3% a year. Townhomes were 12.3%, and condos just under 10. And that is actually kind of a flip from what we've seen in recent years, where the lower price point properties, townhomes and condos, have actually had a higher market trend based on the data. It kind of flipped this year, where the demand seemed to be in those larger single family homes. So that last example is just applying it to that single family rate of 14.3% for another sort of way to look at it. Then it would be adjusted to plus 1.19 per month. The adjusted sale price would be $531,800 to that January 2022 assessment date, which would require an assessed value of $508,400 to hit that same 95.6% median. Year-over-year growth of 18.2%. And just to see that visually, on the left there was the first example of the sale adjusted at the 14.3%. Excuse me, that was the most recent example, but using that 14.3% trend to the sale price. So that sale, $450,000 up to the assessment date, applying the 14.3% trend, 531.8. And on the right there, you see how the impact of the assessment growth, that 95.6% ratio for the 21 assessment at 430,000 as it related directly to the sale price. Now that assessed value would have to be adjusted to 508,400 for the 22 assessment to achieve that same 95.6% ratio in the eyes of the Department of Revenue's sales ratio study. So that is a standard that we have to meet. All sales are required to be adjusted. So just another way to phrase it is our overall assessment growth for the entire city is a result of the adjustment required to reach the desired target for all properties, all sales in the city. And the other important note there is that if we're increasing all sales to meet that requirement, we have to treat all other properties in the city similarly. We can't just move values to the sales and not everybody else equally. That would make my job a lot easier if we could, but we cannot do that. So just to get a little bit more into the data behind the assessment, I'm displaying 5 years of sales data here in the city of Eden Prairie for residential property sales. As you can see, 2018 and 19 pretty steady at that 1,300, upper 1,300s. And these are sales within that study period we talked about earlier. Big dip in 2021, that is the 2021 assessment, so sales used to set that assessment. Reason for that obviously being everything that occurred throughout 2020. There was kind of a lag in sales and then it picked back up. So the spike in 2022 you see is not necessarily related to more properties available. There is still an extremely short supply of housing in the Twin Cities and throughout most national markets. Less than 1 month, where a typical balanced market is 4 to 6 months of supply. But of those 1,400 sales that occurred within that study period, not all of them are qualified for the Department of Revenue's study. Some might be considered not open market sales or not reflective of market value. Distressed sales, bank sales, just to name a couple examples of those. So the result of that is we ended up with 1,260 residential sales that were qualified for study and setting the 2022 assessment. So about 87% of all sales that occurred, when you take out the properties that may not have been reflective of market value, which is a pretty high percentage compared to some neighboring counties or jurisdictions. This is a significant sample size to set our assessment based on. Just another point to make is that since that study has ended, so starting in October 1 of 2021 to current date, we have 343 post-study sales, we refer to them as, that have been processed. Our current 2022, just using our updated 2022 assessed value on those sales, our median value is 99.3% in total. So that tells us that these higher than usual adjustments, year-over-year growth in our assessment was justified. We didn't overshoot the market, and in fact, had we targeted a lower number, we would just have to make up for it next year. So overall assessment growth, we went from $11.8 billion in total market value, all property types included, to $13.45 billion. That's an increase of 14%. That number does include new construction. The segmented numbers below that do not include new construction. So single family, for example, was the biggest year-over-year gain at 19% in terms of percentage. Then you see townhomes at 15, condos 13, co-ops 4. Commercial was relatively flat at 1% increase overall. Industrial 8%, multifamily 5%.
I question. That $13 billion market value is can you tell us how much is that from the new construction?
Yes, actually.
Because we have been sitting here and approving multiple constructions last
Yeah.
couple of years. Just wondering what
Yeah,
the
do you have
additional
the-
value added.
Yeah, absolutely. The total amount rounded, it's going to be really close to this number. 128 million of that total was new construction. That includes everything from brand new buildings, new apartment buildings, additions on properties, even down to adding a deck on your house.
Okay. Thank you.
You're welcome. As stated before, listed out here is just how other communities and counties compare with the city of Eden Prairie. So the early reports for single-family increases across the metro, you can see there, we're pretty much right in line with most counties in the metro area. So 23% reported in Anoka, 20 in our neighboring Carver County. Hennepin County, if you just take all the suburbs, at 18%. Minneapolis was the low number at 10%. Historically speaking, still a lot of growth. It was, again, a historic year. I did want to touch on a question that we're getting quite commonly is the homestead market value exclusion and impacts of these value increases to this exclusion. So what this is, it was introduced in 2011 as a replacement to the homestead credit. It used to be a direct credit to your tax bill, which was paid for by the state of Minnesota. Back in 2011, they introduced this as an alternative way to fund that program, which essentially shifted to local jurisdictions the exclusion benefit. And exactly what it does is, based on your assessed value of your property, a certain portion of that total estimated market value may be limited, resulting in your taxable market value. So it's there is the illustration of how it works, but essentially the max benefit at $76,000 of estimated market value is $30,400 of that market value is excluded from taxes. And it phases out all the way down to $413,800 in estimated market value. You no longer will receive a homestead market value exclusion. Obviously, with the growth we've seen in Eden Prairie, specifically on single-family properties, many properties will no longer be eligible to receive this benefit. The tax impacts, for example, on a $302,700 estimated market value property, as you see there, that would receive pretty close to a $10,000 market value exclusion. That property may see that exclusion phased out to zero this year. And what that means in taxes is illustrated there. The $10,000 estimated market value that was excluded, multiplied by the current effective tax rate. Of course, we're talking 23 taxes, which we don't know what the tax rate will be. So for illustration purposes, I've used the current year tax rate of 1.2 effective tax rate. It equates to about $120. So that is that net effect of losing a $10,000 homestead market value exclusion on your total tax bill is a reduction of about $120.
You said that everything goes up around 95, 96%, but online people have been self-reporting everywhere from 15% to 25%. Is that faulty math on those people's part, or is that true?
Every property will go up a little bit different. The increase is to get it to the 95% overall median. So it is a median. Half will be above that, half will be below that 95% of the total sales in that study period. So the 95% is the statistical measuring tool for all properties in Eden Prairie. The growth year over year is what's required to get it, the overall study, to that 95%. So we saw growth upwards in certain neighborhoods that we had compelling data to show that higher than the average increase was needed. Some neighborhoods might have gone up 30%. Some might have only gone up 8%. There is no cap on the increase. There is no minimum. The key here is, based on the data, what you could sell your property for. that's what we're shooting for.
Okay, so people potentially did do their math correct, and it's simply different for different homes.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Just lastly, wanted to touch on the local Board of Appeals and Equalization. That's kind of where we're at now in the process.
I just have.
Sure.
Right. Sorry, I just had one question. Can you go back to the last slide you had? Okay. So the homestead market value exclusion, that's set by the Department of Revenue, right?
It is actually set by the state legislature.
Okay, so Eden Prairie doesn't set that. Okay, thank you.
We do not.
Yep, I just wanted to make that clear.
So the local Board of Appeals and Equalization, again, another part of the annual assessment process. Because we're valuing so many properties using these statistical analyses, again, there is significance behind the data. The numbers are solid. Going into this year, we were looking at the numbers thinking, this can't be right, working with our colleagues around the county and the metro, saying, this is right, and the data is solid, and we have to make these adjustments to meet that standard. Now we're taking a step back. We're removing ourselves from the mass appraisal side of it, and we're talking more about individual review here. So the first step of the process is going to be reaching out to our office. We're here to answer calls. We're taking them in the order we get them, looking at that property on an individual basis. What are going to be the best sales that compare to that property? What would it sell for as of January 2nd? So a lot of these concerns, questions can be explained informally working with the appraiser assigned to that property. If not reach an agreement with residents, at least reach an understanding of how we got there. And we're willing to consider any market data such as comparable sales or recent appraisals that a property owner might have in reviewing that property. So it's a very transparent process, and we want it to be an open line of communication. If a vast majority of these reviews are resolved at that level, if we aren't able to come to an agreement and they would like another opinion, we do have a board appointed by the council that is a board of experts in this area. Most of them are real estate brokers who live and work in Eden Prairie. They know the market very well, and again, they're going to focus on what that property would sell for. They'll probably pull their own comparable sales. We provide them with a recommendation. It is ultimately the board's decision. So at that point, the assessor's office is removed from the decision-making process. We provide a recommendation. So if we can't resolve any disagreements informally between our office and that homeowner, they have that opportunity to appear before the local board. Our first meeting will be held April 6th. With a reconvene meeting scheduled for April 21st. We are requesting applications by March 25th in order to organize an agenda for our board. Because of volume, it's very likely that we won't have analysis completed for a recommendation at that first meeting on the 6th, in which case we would continue our review for a recommendation and to allow the board more time to review information prior to that April 21st meeting. And all that meeting is held here in the council chambers at 7 p.m. All properties on that local board agenda may also appear before the county board. So that would allow us to continue the review of that individual property for 2 more months. That will be handled by city appraisal staff. So if we are unable to do a complete review and communicate that to the taxpayer, the property owner, prior to the reconvene meeting, and our board is unable to make an informed decision here at the local level, we will continue that appeal on to be heard at the county level. Again, most of those reviews are resolved with an agreement, and it's just a decision made by the board that both parties agree on. There are a handful of cases each year that each side presents their information and the board makes a decision.
Okay. I got a question, Jonathan. Sure. Someone calls today, when are they going to be expected to hear from you?
Our hope always is within a day. Right now, that might not be realistic with the volume of
2
calls
days?
we have. 2 to 3 days.
This is important.
2 to 3 days is what we're probably what we're at right now realistically, and what we're also informing property owners is if you get the application in, at this point, that's where we're at, then we can queue you up. You will not lose your ability to pursue these further avenues of review and appeal more on an informal level.
Okay.
It would still have to be on a board's agenda, but we could still resolve that informally for the board to essentially affirm our agreement.
I think that's going to be an important part of the initial discussion. They need to feel that they're treated right, and 2 days, it's reasonable, but a couple, but the sooner the better. Just give me a little of my background here. I retired from the mortgage industry and real estate industry after 35 years. I understand what you're talking about up here, but I'll tell you, I don't envy you sitting across from someone and explaining those formulas to someone as far as they're so complicated. And I think that's what's so much the problem. There's not a simple answer.
Right.
And hats off to you if you can do it as far as, because a lot of people have questions on that, and it is very hard to understand. I mean, you might have seen me a couple times. I'm looking a little closer over at my monitor over here. I go, what? It's amazing how complicated that gets to get to the end answer up on it. So hats off to you. Yeah.
Thank you. I appreciate that. It is a complex property tax system, but I assure you staff is on hand. We're working on the calls and getting back to folks as soon as we can. At this point, the recommendation is to get that application in as soon as possible. Then we can get you in the queue, get you on the board's agenda formally, so that if we can't reach a resolution prior to that March 25th request deadline, we still can review the property value, work with you on more of an informal level.
I've been getting questions about, okay, my taxes just went up 18%. Or my house value went up 18%. Does that mean my taxes are going up 18%? Or I've been telling them, no, it doesn't really. It goes on a curve more. But can you do a quick explanation, or at least say publicly, just because your house went up does not mean your tax is going up? Or maybe the answer is yes, sorry, your taxes are going up.
The short answer to that is that no, it does not mean your taxes will go up by that amount. It is too early to say exactly what that tax impact will be. Obviously, budgets are set in the fall. It most likely is not going to be by that commensurate amount of the percentage of your value increase. And the reason is that all residential properties went up by that amount. And so it will likely lead to a lowered effective tax rate on the individual house. A lot of things go into making up the overall effective tax rate that are out of the city's control. And there's so many formulas that are way too early to predict on that actual impact to the tax amount. But there's been scenarios where value has increased and taxes remain flat. There's scenarios where the value remained constant, taxes went down. Certainly city taxes have gone down in those scenarios, and vice versa, where value has decreased and taxes have still gone up. So does that answer your question?
I think so. It sounds more or less like what I've been telling people. So it's always nice to confirm that I haven't been giving them inaccurate information.
Let me step in here just for a moment. You're doing a great job, and thank you so much. And you clearly are incredibly knowledgeable and intelligent about this, so thank you. I really appreciate, as Councilmember Freiberg said, that your office is taking the time to work with residents. So the assessment, the value of your home is what drives the tax that will be derived from it. And you referred to a tax rate. So a tax rate is the amount per $1,000 of value that we will get from all properties across the city, commercial, housing, whatever. So in theory, if our council had a 0% increase in budget and a 0% increase, therefore, in the levy, which then will drive the tax rate, if the value of the $11 billion in real estate across the whole city goes up to $50 billion, say you get a tripling of your house value, which you ought to be super excited about. If you have a $300,000 house, suddenly you could sell it for $900,000. but your taxes literally would go up zero under that scenario I just said. If we're raising the same $40 million, we have a $50 million budget, and we raised $40 million off of taxes. So if we're raising $40 million and we're spreading that among a $10 billion tax base, a $50 billion tax base, we still raise $40 million. So your assessment can drive what your tax ends up being, but it's all a relative thing. If your house went up and all your neighbors went down, you're going to pay more in taxes. If your house goes down and all your neighbors go up, you're going to pay less in taxes because we raised $40 million from the tax base. So I know that people are seeing a percentage that your value of your home went up 24%. And right away that's thinking, I can't sustain this. I can't pay that in taxes. You're not going to pay that in taxes. Your taxes might go, if everyone went up 24%, your taxes are going to go up however much the five of us decide to raise taxes to pay for parks and police and fire. And so if we raise taxes or raise a levy that we're collecting 3%, then the chances are across the city your taxes will go up around 3%. Regardless what your value is. So I understand the concern that if your $300,000 house is now worth $400,000, that's going to forever increase the potential for taxes to rise based on that $400,000. I get it. But by golly, if you're in a city like ours that's healthy, that's improving our tax base, we're keeping the rate of your tax low, so your $400,000 house will not pay that much more than it was worth when it was $300,000. But now you got a $400,000 house. And granted, you can't actualize that money until you sell it, but that's a really good thing. So I know that we all want the city assessor to price our house low, and the sales appraiser to price it high. But the reality is that the law says that delta between those two have to be within about 5%. We just can't, because we like you or because we like all of us. We love Eden Prairie and we want to keep all of our assessments low, so we all pay a lower amount of county tax, and there's a state tax for some of this, and that's not legal. So it's a good thing that your houses are going up in value. I understand the fear of the taxes. They're connected, but they're not they're slightly correlated, but there's no cause. Well, is that even true? I think so. I don't think there's causality directly, but it definitely drives it. But what really drives it the most is what the five of us do when we set a budget, set a levy, go out and collect from the 13.45 billion tax base, because we spread that over everything. And then that's what will drive the taxes on each of those properties. And by the way, just like you shared, and you're right on the money, is that there's variables in there like the state legislature. There's a formula. They decide, well, this year we're going to tax residential heavier than apartments because whatever, we want to help apartment buildings. Or maybe the business community, which we love, lobbies hard at the legislature and gets commercial to go up a little bit less than residential. So that factor, we can have everything perfect here thinking your taxes are barely going to go up, and then the legislature changes the formula. So there's a lot of variables out there, but just the fact that your assessment went up is not necessarily, it's absolutely not related. No, it's related. It's absolutely not the same as your taxes going up. And it ought to be in many ways a really good thing that your home value is going up that much. You're in a healthy city, high quality, people want to live here. That's what's moving this more than anything else out there, is the idea that, I just got this number, the sale to list price in Eden Prairie year over year was 103.2%. So people are paying more than houses are even being listed. That's how much they're fighting over the houses. That's what's driving your assessment. Not the five of us, not you, not any staff member. What's driving the uptick in assessments is that people want to live in Eden Prairie. And that is driving home prices to be high. That's a good thing. I know there's a bad piece to that in your mind, in many people's minds, but it's a really good thing in the big picture. I'll give it back to you. Thank you so much.
Very well said, Mayor Case. And if I could just add to that, one of the common phrases I use to explain it is that if the assessed value in a city doubles, the city doesn't collect an extra dime. until those levies are set. Depending where that value goes might shift the pie a little bit, which we might see a little bit on the residential side for next year. But it won't be as drastic as it looks on paper. And so that's what I'd say. My final point here on appeal options is after the county board, you have a formal option of filing in tax court. That's pretty rare for your residential property, but it is an option that extends until the following, that would have to be filed before May 1st of the following year in which taxes are actually payable. So if you missed every deadline, you still have one option, every local deadline. And I'd open it up to any final questions.
Councilmember Narayan.
Well, thank you for the explanations. As you know, we are getting questions and emails and challenges. They, like Mr. Freiber said, it's very important to answer them. The questions a lot of people do not understand. One example I can say is somebody pointed out they thought 23% tax went up. And so I looked at mine personally, and it looked like 20 or 23% went up the value of the house. But if you really look at it, the tax went up was around 5%. Then talking to our city manager, that I learned that 5% is not all city tax. And a lot of people in the residents don't know that or not aware of that. And in the city perspective, we only get, what, 3% or 2% or something like that?
A third of the tax.
One third. 33% of that 5% we get. Rest of them go to the school board and the county and so on. I also would say today's session, maybe we should publicize more tomorrow and let people know so they get an education about hopefully not linear analysis, linear regressions. I know what you're talking about, and I was wondering it's polynomial regression or linear regression. But anyway, thank you for that. I don't think many people know what that is.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me.
One more or done? Okay, great. Thank you so much. Appreciate that. I feel like we are in good hands, so
Thank you.
appreciate you and your team, your staff.
Thank you.
All right. Approval of agenda. Anyone have any items to add to the agenda tonight? If not, is there a motion to approve the agenda?
Move to approve the agenda.
Second.
Second.
Further discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Minutes. Any questions about anything on either the workshop or the council meeting held back on March 1st? Now, is there a motion to approve them both?
Move to approve the following city council minutes. Council workshop held Tuesday, March 1st, 2022. City council meeting held Tuesday, March 1st, 2022.
Is there a second?
Second.
Any further discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Consent calendar. Any items A through P that you'd like to learn more about, pull for discussion, ask questions, anything? If not, is there a motion to approve the consent calendar A through P?
I'll move to approve items A through P on the consent calendar.
Is there a second?
Second.
Further discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? All right. Mr. Getcho, the first of our public hearings this evening, the Schulman edition.
Thank you, Mayor. Yes, the Schulman edition, named for Tammy Schulman, who's bringing forward the application, requesting approval to create 2 single-family lots at this address on Riverview Road, totaling 2.477 acres. The property currently consists of, again, a home at 12076 Riverview Road and a just under half-acre strip of land that was previously used as a road. The applicant would like to subdivide the property, create 2 buildable lots. The existing single-family home will be kept as part of the project, and then the new lot would be developed as a new single-family home at a future date on the second lot. So pretty straightforward. 2 lots out of 1. I believe the applicant is here to address the city council, provide a brief overview, answer any questions that the council may have. Staff can as well. The action again is zoning district change following a public hearing from rural to R1 13.5 and approving a preliminary plat.
Great. Go ahead and give your name and address, and welcome.
Thank you, Your Honor, council members. My name is Tammy Schulman. I live at 12076 Riverview Road, and I would indeed like to divide this. We have a presentation? Yep. There is my home in its previous state. It's one of the heritage sites. You're looking at the eastern side of it now, and I'm using this photo initially because of that historic. That historic aspect. It has changed a little bit, and when you look at this current aerial view, you see that the we're looking at this straight on now. That house has been slid over to the far west side in order to make room for the power line that came in late 50s. So there is, I'll show you on this next slide, there is a easement that runs right through the center of that property for the power line, which reduces the amount of land that can be actually developed. So this is the current survey, the current existing survey, and it is now zoned rural. The driveway you can see on the right side is actually on the neighbor's property. I just discovered that this year, and we would need to correct that. I have spoken with them, and we'll have an agreement to have a shared use on this. This is the preliminary plat. This is how I'd like to divide this. So the eastern portion would be I think it's just about an acre. I decided to make this one lot rather than multiple lots because of the topography of it. Would make the view from the hilltop house much less than it could be, and the house built closer to Riverview would be kind of off on its own. So anyway, that was the logic behind it. We'd need to subdivide that and then relocate the driveway for the existing home, and then the new development would have to create a driveway on, entirely within the property line. And that's pretty much it.
Just have a quick question. I think
Yes,
of
sir.
staff, but you can please stand there just for a moment.
Yeah.
And then we'll have a public hearing. Typically, when we have a housing development, I guess I'm thinking out loud, but looking at Julie here, we'll place the houses with setbacks that are similar to along a row. So in this case, it wouldn't make sense to put this new house back even with the current existing home, but what would you go by? Would it just be a regular 30-foot setback off of Riverview Road, or what do you envision, or has it been platted out with this project coming before us tonight?
Mayor, members of the council, so the setbacks that would apply to the new lot would be the standards that are set forth in the R113.5 zoning district. So because there's not a building permit that's being applied for this lot at this point, the setbacks and the specific configuration of the lot or the home layout on the lot is to be determined at the time that the home is built.
And in your mind right now, because there's no precedent on where to put this house, because on the east side there's just a row of several houses, and on the west side is this existing house fairly set back, it doesn't make sense to necessarily think of this new house would be on its own. You'd place it wherever it would make sense. Okay.
That's correct.
Got it. Council, what's your pleasure? Do you want to have a public hearing and then close it, and then if you have any more questions or comments, it's pretty straightforward.
That's fine.
Okay. Sit down. If we need you, we'll call you back up. Thanks for being here. So this is a public hearing. Is there anyone in the audience wishing to address the council tonight on the Shulman subdivision? Then, let's see, you could go ahead and close and make the motion if you felt comfortable, and we can discuss that. If you feel that you want to actually alter the motion or something, we could just close the public hearing. Anyone have a thought? If you can make the motion and get a second, we can just go ahead and make the whole thing and then have a discussion. Does that sound okay?
Yeah, I'm comfortable with it as it stands. It seems very much similar to what we've done on other lots.
Someone go ahead and make a motion on all of it.
All right, I'll move to close the public hearing and approve the first and second reading of the ordinance for a zoning district change from rural to R1-13.5 on 2.477 acres, and adopt a resolution for a preliminary plat to divide 2 lots into 2 lots on 2.477 acres.
Second.
Second.
Okay, council, let's see. Actually, the public hearing's not closed, though.
It was a motion to close it, Mayor, so
But we didn't pass it, though, so...
you have a second and a vote, and then everything's done.
Yeah.
But I was going to ask them if they wanted additional discussion.
So you get a second and then ask for discussion. You can still keep
The
discussing.
public hearing's
It's
technically...
fine. It's okay.
That's fine.
Yep.
All right, council, anything else you want to question? Any comments you want to make, or should we just go ahead and vote? Kind of looking at nods here. Okay. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? All right. Passes unanimously. Congratulations. Good luck. Thanks for being here. All right, Mr. Getcho, next public hearing.
Thank you, Mayor and council members. Chick-Fil-A, which you know is part of Flying Cloud Commons retail development, is part of a project with a few other retail projects that you approved last February as part of the Castle Ridge and Presbyterian Homes redevelopment project. As the project actually nears construction, Chick-fil-A made a few alterations to their project, and so they're seeking updated approvals for their planned unit development and waivers. And I believe the applicant is here tonight to go over those adjustments and changes, and then the action again is to adopt a resolution for the PUD and update the development agreement.
Great. Please, welcome, come forward, name, address.
Good evening, Your Honor, and fellow council members. My name is Joe Vavrina with HR Green. Address is 1391 Corporate Drive, McHenry, Illinois. And I'm here tonight on behalf of Chick-fil-A to present the project to you guys. So, here we go. Before I get into the actual proposal, I just want to share a few highlights on Chick-fil-A as a company. First and foremost, family owned and privately held. And as most of you probably know, they are closed on Sundays. If you ever tried to visit one on a Sunday and they were not open, they are closed on Sundays, which is really a tradition to honor their founder, Truett Cathy, for a day of rest. They operate over 2,600 locations in 47 states, including Washington, D.C. and Canada. More on the local level, from the operator's standpoint, the franchisee operator will be locally located in the community that the restaurant is located, so that they'll be in Eden Prairie. And really the purpose of that is to have them more engaged in not only in the community, but also in the success of the restaurant. Most franchisee operators are only allowed to operate one location. And again, that is really to focus them into the success of the store and then also being involved in the community itself. Beyond that, the last point on this slide I just wanted to point out is that Chick-fil-A does give back, and over the years since 1970, they have awarded more than $110 million in scholarships to over 66,000 team members that they have to promote them as they grow and continue their lives. So pretty cool stuff. So as we get to the actual proposal, and as it was mentioned, the site plan was approved with the original development. And really, the request tonight for these changes was really born from the pandemic. When COVID-19 hit, it really changed the customer service model as we all know it. Dining rooms closed, and a lot of traffic was forced through the drive-through lane, either through the mobile order app or just through drive-through sales in general. So Chick-fil-A's challenge was to figure out a way, how do we more efficiently move traffic through the drive-through lane? And this is really where the dual flex, as they've coined it, was born, which is a full 2 lanes through the drive-through to promote traffic to move through that drive-through lane more efficiently. So If you remember back, and it's probably in the staff report, the original concept plan that was approved had 2 lanes up to the order point, then it necked down to 1, and then it went back to 2 at the pickup window. So this proposal is just to continue that second lane all the way through. And as part of that, we're also adding in a canopy at the pickup window, really to provide shelter for the team members as they're handing orders out to the guests. So the dual flex concept is, and the reason why they call it dual flex is that it provides flexibility to the operator and how they want to use that outer lane. So there could be a number of different ways they can use that outer lane. They can use it as a second lane for meal fulfillment. They can use it for fulfillment of mobile orders or third-party orders, or they could use it as a bypass. Or they can interchangeably use it throughout the day depending on the demand of the restaurant and the time it is. So, and they use magnetic delineators to close that outer lane off as they see fit. So, there could be a point in the day where they have the first, the 2 lanes open to the order point, and then they may still use that outer lane as a bypass beyond that, depending on the demand. But during the peak time, when the demand is high, we would expect that they would either use both lanes, so they can use for a meal fulfillment to get that traffic through a lot faster. So that's essentially what has led us to this point. So changes on the site plan was the addition or the continuation of that second lane, so it's 2 full lanes, the canopy, as I mentioned earlier, and then as part of that, there's a couple variations that we're asking for. One is for the a setback reduction on the corner of the canopy from 20 feet to 7.3, just given the unique lot line that we have on the north side with the park area. It corner clipped a part of that canopy out, whereas if we were to adhere to 20, there wouldn't be much of the canopy left. The second one is a couple islands as part of the reconfiguration of the entry of that parking lot. Were less than 5 feet. And then the third was the order points. We have 2 order points with menu boards. Each menu board is 20 square feet, and the code allows 32, so the combination of 2 is 40, so we're slightly over. Each order point is less than code, but we have 2 of them. That kind of summarizes, I guess what we're looking for landscape-wise. The site is going to be attractively landscaped. The drive-through lane itself will be attractively landscaped as well and screened to help the view from flying clouds, so you don't get the light spill over and or the visibility of the vehicles that are in the drive-through lane. The building itself, all brick with metal coping on the top. That carries over to the canopy. That'll also match the same dark bronze color as the top of the building. And then we've wrapped the canopy columns to match the facade of the building. So we have the water table at the bottom that matches the water table on the building, and then same color brick as we go above that to match the building as well, to tie into the architecture. These are more just elevation renderings of what the building looks like with that canopy attached to it on the outside. And again, the canopy itself is freestanding, but it's only a couple inches away from the building, so it looks like it is attached. And this is the side views where the trash enclosure is in the bottom view, and then the top view would be where the pickup window is. And the pickup window is a pickup window and a door. So during regular times when they're not using both lanes, it's just a regular window like you would see at any quick service restaurant. When both lanes are being used, it turns into a door to where the team members can pull orders out of the cockpit a lot more efficiently, quicker, and they can get that traffic move through quicker. And with that, that's all I have for you.
Council, any questions of the proponent?
I got one.
Yes,
I mean,
Councilmember Freiberg.
I've been to the Chanhassen one and also St. Louis Park quite a bit.
Sure.
Now, I'm looking at this second lane. I think I got the answer, but is it going to be very similar to like what you're doing right now at Chanhassen? Because it says it's a second lane after the menu order, as far as boards.
Right.
So that one has that, if not mistaken.
Does Chanhassen? I don't believe Chanhassen has two
Or
full lanes
St.
all the
Louis
way
Park
through.
that does. One of them I thought had that.
I know St. Louis Park doesn't. I did that one, and I did Chanhassen too. And it was the old model where it was one lane, there was two lanes, and then it necked down, and then it opened up to the bypass. So I still think there's a neck in there on both sites. Now both sites are going to get an upgrade, so it's full 2 lanes all the way through on both St. Louis Park and Chanhassen, but I don't believe those have been constructed
So
yet.
this would just continue down then the second lane, as you're saying?
Correct,
rather than
correct. So
come in.
there would be no necking down to one lane. It's full 2 lanes all the way through.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions before we open it up to a public hearing?
I just have a quick one.
Yes, go ahead.
Why isn't the canopy attached to the building? You said it's a couple inches away. Wouldn't it be sturdier if it was attached?
From a structural standpoint, it's more efficient to keep it as a freestanding versus trying to tie it into the building, because then all your members have to get thicker. That's where the kitchen is, and looking at the different components of how to get that attached versus non-attached, it was more cost effective to leave it a freestanding than to try to beef up that wall to be able to handle the load from that canopy.
Gotcha.
Your picture didn't show any trees or flowers, though your written thing says they exist. So I assume the picture you've shown us isn't the same as what would be there
Correct.
with all the trees and flowers.
Those are just renderings to kind of give you an idea what the
So
canopy
it's not
will look
going
like.
to be a stark something
no,
with no shade,
no.
no flowers, no nothing.
It'll be a combination of trees, shrubs, perennials, grasses, to give it.
Thank you. I did want to know about that because often they stick something in to indicate that there's trees and such.
Yes, yeah. The landscape plan that was included will give you a better idea of what we're proposing to do there.
Councilmember Narayanan.
Thank you, Mayor. I was hoping you bring samples. I was really very disappointed about that.
They weren't going to last for McHenry, unfortunately.
Okay. So the 2-lane again, it look like a bank. The 2-lane in the bank. So second lane on the outer lane. How do you get the food? Is it like same way, like through bank?
No.
Through the shoulder?
No. So team members will walk it across the drive-through lane, the first inner lane, and then will service vehicles in that outer lane. So
the team member going up and down, crossing.
Correct.
That lane?
So there's a striped area down the middle between the 2 lanes for that safety zone for the team member to walk in. So they'll be actually walking down that safety zone, handing orders out to the guests.
You don't feel that dangerous or?
No, because the
team
traffic
members?
is moving pretty slow through that drive-through lane. It's not a high rate of speed. They're inching along. So, and there's signage, there's striping to provide those safety zones for the team members so that it doesn't become a safety issue. And Chick-Fil-A, since this initiative has been born, has implemented it on quite a few locations, and the results have been very impressive. So safety-wise, has not been an issue, and the rate of customer service has increased.
So you have implemented this scheme
Yes.
other places and being
Correct.
successful?
Correct.
And no accident, nothing?
No.
Okay.
It's
So I
worked
think
out
if
very
you
well.
do go to the pneumatic tube delivery, I think he wants to be in on
I
that.
want that. I want that.
We've actually looked at that, but it was more on the 2-level version versus where we have a kitchen in the basement or on a different level. Then you have that pneumatic piece. So yeah.
I was joking. But, yeah.
No, I was serious
I know
about
you.
that. So just the last question. I'm a big fan of broadband. Do you get free Wi-Fi inside the restaurant?
Yes. Yes, there's free Wi-Fi in the restaurant.
It's predictable, huh? No, that's good. That's good.
Because a lot of people working from home,
Yeah,
right?
no.
Yes.
They're tired of sitting at home and they want a break, go to Chick-Fil-A
Yep.
for lunch and work and then come home, right? So
Correct.
hopefully it's high speed.
It should be.
Yeah,
yes.
electric charge stations in the
No, I'm going to
restaurant.
pass that one this time.
All right.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Let's go ahead and have
Sample
a
is
public
good
hearing,
idea.
and we'll keep going with the conversation if you wish. So thank you so much. This is a public hearing. Anyone in the audience wishing to address the council on the Chick-fil-A project? All right, council, are you ready to make the entire motion? Do you just want to close the public hearing? What's your pleasure?
Close the whole thing.
Go ahead and make the whole motion then.
Move to close the public hearing and adopt resolution for plan unit development concept review on 1.27 acres and approve the first reading of the ordinance of the plan unit development district review with waiver on 1.27 acres and direct staff to prepare development agreement incorporating staff and commission recommendations and council conditions.
Is there a second?
Second.
Any further discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Passes. Welcome.
Welcome.
All right, Mr. Getcho, the certificate of appropriateness for the Cummins Grill House.
Thank you, Mayor. Yes, actually, a very exciting project. We were able to, what's precipitating all this is city was able to get a grant to help replace the roof, put a new roof on the Cummins Grill House. And so that requirement with many of our historic properties, and the grill house is obviously designated as a heritage preservation site, is on the National Register of Historic Places. When you do certain improvements to historic properties, you need to gain a certificate of appropriateness. And so we have actually, that's something where we have action at our Heritage Preservation Commission. We have a public hearing at the City Council level as well. So this goes through at least a two-step process while getting to the City Council. And so as I mentioned, the reason for this certificate of appropriateness is for a new roof on the house, the shed, and the outhouse. So simply you can see in your packet that you, after having a public hearing, you adopt findings of fact and find the certificate of appropriateness. You approve that and you recommend that for the replacement of the roofs. And that is what the Heritage Preservation Commission unanimously recommended at their meeting on February 28th.
So it's the fact that this house is on the National Historic Registry, not the certified local government part of our Heritage Preservation Commission, that's driving the need to have the public hearing?
I think, Mayor, and that's a good question. I think my initial reaction is we could also be required even if it's not on the National Registry.
Certified local
Yeah.
government. Okay.
We've done this. Well, I'm thinking of the other places that we have done this. Camp Edenwood,
Right.
And the Smith Douglas Moore House are also in the National Registry.
The Smith Douglas Moore is not on the National Registry, but it is a certified local government designated property.
And we have done COAs, so that answers the question.
Got it.
Yep.
And just to let the public know that the National Historic Register is pretty picky, and many cities have 0 properties that are on that registry, and we have 2. We have the Cummins Grill House, and even though one might argue, nothing against J.R. Cummins who built it, one might argue that it's a fairly simple Chaska brick farmhouse. There are dozens and dozens across the state, but what makes this very special is that J.R. Cummins was a renowned horticulturalist, so that's how that house got, because it is a fine example of that type of farmhouse, but also because of the owner. And then the second one is our Camp Edenwood, which is one of only 2 tuberculosis children's camps still in existence from the 1920s across the United States of America. So we have 2 locations, and we have a couple other properties that we think could qualify eventually, but the fact that we have 2 is pretty special. So that's why tonight we're dealing with one of them and getting this, which is phenomenal, getting a grant for this roof, which is not cheap, to put cedar shake shingles on this roof. And have it be not directly tax dollars paid for by tax dollars for the people of Eden Prairie. I guess everything's indirect, but nonetheless, it's a grant coming from the state. Okay, Council, this is a public hearing, so I'm going to open it up in a moment. Any comments or questions prior?
I had one comment, which was clarified, but I just wanted to let you guys know that I was concerned about because it's wood shingle roof, about a fire hazard. But it was clarified to me that they will be treated with fire retardant, some type of material. So
sure,
that's it. That's all I wanted to let you guys know.
Clarification.
Yeah, it'd be a shame if anything happened because of the roof.
Yeah. Good. Let's open up the public hearing then. This is a public hearing. Anyone in the audience this evening wishing to address the council on the approval of the certificate of appropriateness for the replacement of a roof. It looks like roofs because I suppose the outbuildings at the Cummins Phipps Grill house historic property. Anyone? If not, council, someone want to make the motion? Go ahead and make the whole thing.
I'll move to close the public hearing and adopt the findings of fact and approve the certificate of appropriateness 2022-01-004 for the replacement of the roofs at the Cummings House site.
Second.
Any further discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? All right. Mr. Getchell, the redevelopment plan modification.
Thank you,
TIF
Mayor.
district.
Yes, thank you, Mayor and council members. You're becoming familiar with this due to Councilmember Narayan mentioned earlier a lot of the development that we're seeing, and a lot of the development is related to multifamily mixed income apartment projects. And you approved, preliminarily approved, first reading of the Greco development at the Golden Triangle, Flying Cloud Drive area. 425 mixed income apartment project. And so now we're here tonight to simply hold a public hearing for considering the use of tax increment financing to cover the affordability of the units within the building. So you actually held a similar public hearing for the Ellie a month or two ago, and also for Paravel before that. So as you know, we've been pretty consistently providing tax increment financing. That's our mode of incentive and subsidy for affordable apartment units and mixed income projects in Eden Prairie. And so what happens here would be that we ask that you hold the public hearing. The actual plan is in your packet, and our consultant from Ellers, who helped develop the TIF plan, is here if you were to have any other questions. But then the actual TIF agreement and TIF plan and final development agreement and second reading that would occur with Greco Properties for this project would come at a later council meeting.
So just clarification for anyone listening at home, TIF is tax increment financing. It's a state legislative tool that allows communities to take future tax revenue and apply it to current projects that might not have been able to be built without it. So it's kind of a but for this project, this piece of it, or this affordable housing in this instance would not have been able to have occurred but for this financing tool. Taxpayers don't take a hit for this. It's really a way of just borrowing, I guess, from future to pay something now.
Future of their own taxes. So they're still paying their own taxes. Right. It's typically pay as you go, which means they get payments on an annual basis. They don't get any lump sum up front.
And it's on new projects that increase tax base for our community, which we were talking about earlier. So there's this increased tax base, and sometimes this is for affordable housing, but sometimes it's the project itself would not have been able to occur, and therefore the tax base wouldn't have been there. Therefore, it's a win-win-win, really. And state legislature, again, allows cities to use this tool. All right. Let's go ahead, I guess, and it's fairly perfunctory unless someone has an issue with the concept of TIF. I certainly understand that. But let's go ahead and open this up. This is a public hearing. Anyone in the audience wishing to address the council on the redevelopment plan modification for redevelopment project area number 5, establishment of TIF? Seeing none, council, is there someone I would suggest closing the public hearing and making the entire motion?
I will move to close the public hearing and direct staff to include the redevelopment plan modification for redevelopment project area number 5, establishment of TIF district number 26, and adoption of a TIF plan on a future city council meeting agenda, and recommend that staff include the TIF plan and the TIF development agreement on a future HRA meeting agenda.
Second. Is there any further discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? All right. Mr. Getchell, this is fairly perfunctory, but so a vacation right away. Go ahead.
Thank you. Yes, Mayor and Council. Also, as you've seen with almost all of our development of projects, we need to come back and vacate prior easements and sometimes dedicate new easements. So in this case, we're vacating right-of-way and easements for the LE. So I mentioned that earlier. That's the Lincoln Lane multifamily housing project on Eden Prairie Road. So the request is vacating a 13-foot drainage and utility easement. And then also, which is typical as well, if one of the utilities, in this case CenterPoint, Xcel Energy, again in this case CenterPoint, is still negotiating with the developer over the relocation of utilities in these easements, we are usually predicate our approval on no objection from those utilities. So that's included in this as well. So we've seen that in the past.
Does that create a new right-of-way then, right? Because if CenterPoint comes back and says we have to have this line over here, and that right-of-way currently isn't in the current project, that would be drawn up, and we would come back to this body, and we would, okay.
Yep.
Yes.
Mayor Case, oftentimes what happens is they're negotiating who's going to pay for the relocation of those utilities, and so the developer and Comcast and CenterPoint in this case are still working out those details, but they always do, and once we receive that letter of no objection, then we can release the vacation and certify, release the easements and the right-of-way, and then certify the resolution, and the issue will resolve itself.
Okay. Any further questions? We'll go ahead and have a public hearing. Then this is a public hearing. Anyone in the audience wishing to address the council on the resolution vacating right-of-way and easements for the project, the LE? Seeing none, council, go ahead and make a motion.
Move to close the public hearing and adopt a resolution vacating right-of-way and easements.
Is there a second?
Second.
Any further discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? All right, payment of claims. Any items, expenditures that you wish to question as you read through the pages and pages of the checks that were, I don't know if we cut checks anymore, but the electronic transfers that occurred over the last couple weeks. All right, if not, is there a motion to approve payment of claims?
Move to approve the payment of claim as submitted.
Is there a second?
Second.
Roll call.
Councilmember Freiberg,
Aye.
Councilmember Narayan,
Aye.
Councilmember Nelson,
Aye.
Councilmember Toomey,
Aye.
Mayor Case.
Aye. Thank you. All right, Mr. Getcho, ordinances and resolutions.
Thank you, Mayor. We have a few coming back here, and both of these, and I'll go through them one by one, obviously, are based on some council discussion, and in the case of the housing one, quite a bit of work on behalf of our task force. First ordinance, for the first reading of an ordinance amending our city code related to mobile food vendors or food trucks. So initially, this was coming forward as an update for permits and clarifying permits that are needed from our fire department for our fire code to make sure the food trucks that come into Eden Prairie have had an inspection. And then in discussing this, we actually brought to the council the idea of relaxing our code and actually allowing food vendors in more zoned areas of the city than we typically have. We began this process of having an ordinance which allows food trucks at all in the city about 7 years ago, and required that they be mainly in office, commercial, and industrial areas. There's a whole section where for certain events at people's houses or at other commercial areas and retail areas, certain number of days, certain limits. But in discussing with the Chamber of Commerce and then discussing in a workshop with the City Council, the idea was presented that we actually open up the ability for food trucks to be in most commercial zoning areas. So the update in front of you is to allow them in those commercial districts with the exception of neighborhood commercial. We identified a few small neighborhood commercial parcels where we don't think that would necessarily be appropriate, but certainly appropriate in those town center area, the Eden Prairie Center area, and always with the approval of the property owner. So just kind of keeping in mind, and this has always been the case in Eden Prairie, a food truck can't come onto your property uninvited. That's always needing approval of the landowner. So that is the update that's coming before you tonight, is to some clarification updates to fire code inspections and to actually allow the trucks to be in more commercial areas of Eden Prairie.
Councilmember Freiberg.
Mr. Getchell, I just got a question here. The baseball stadium. Okay, it's city property as far, and the parking lot itself. One thing they've always had a problem up there is food. And what we're doing here tonight, will they be allowed to have a food truck up there with with the proper permit and stuff?
So Councilmember Freiberg, I think the current code allows for the trucks to be on public property and in parks with the approval of the Park and Recreation Director. So that's still the case. I don't know if Mr. Lotheimer wants to weigh in on Round Lake Stadium, but we have in the past and would continue to allow these to be in city parks.
That'd be great. Thank you.
I assume that the health codes are done by the county, so we don't have to worry about this, or was part of our old permit project that they did have health code certification? Or? Correct,
Councilmember Nelson. They do need to get permits from the Department of Health, and then those need to be displayed. They need to have those. It's just simply our fire department is able to do an inspection that might actually be a little bit separate and different from the health department's permit inspection related to some of the food and the cooking. The fire department might be looking at a few other health and safety items as well, but that still exists. They need that, and that's something they get from the Department of Health.
If a food truck wanted to park permanently and just stay closed up when it's not active, but permanently with permission up at the mall, our ordinance would permit that now that we've raised the 21-day limit?
I don't know if Ms. Klima has a comment on the time limits.
Mayor, members of the council, I believe that they could park on a more permanent basis because that 21-day limitation has been removed with this proposed ordinance.
I guess my thought to that, I support all of this and I support that, what was just said. Anytime a city like we or a council works to expand out an idea, a concept, a food truck, this is a great example of food truck concept, based on recommendations by our residents, based on businesses coming to us, whatever. It's iterative, and this is not like set in stone. We try it. We tried it before under an ordinance that was fairly restrictive. We've been encouraged to loosen it. We're trying that. If it still needs to be changed or tweaked or tightened, we can do that. So if this works, fantastic. If it begins to have other ramifications or subsequent problems that we didn't anticipate, we look at this again. So I just want to let everyone know that I know you know that, but I just want to remind us that any time that we expand an ordinance or try something, that's exactly what we're doing. We're just trying it out based on some recommendations and proposals that we get from our residents. We're trying to be sensitive to that, and businesses. But if it creates problems, we'll figure that out. So, anybody else want to? This does require a motion, then.
I'll move to approve the first reading of an ordinance amending City Code Chapter 5, Section 5.76 relating to mobile food vendors, and Chapter 9, Section 9.05 relating to fire code permits.
Second.
Any further discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, Mr. Getchell.
Thank you, Mayor. The other ordinance I alluded to earlier is for amending City Code to create an affordable housing trust fund. So through the work of our housing task force, they brought, obviously, as you recall, several recommendations. They brought a report, which you approved. One of the first steps in the report was the inclusionary housing ordinance that was eventually passed. There was also a discussion on having our city create our own citywide affordable housing trust fund, and that is what we're asking tonight in the first reading of the ordinance. I will state, I mean, if you think about what you just approved, what you didn't approve, but you had a public hearing for, related to the LE and the Greco. We have, many, many tools at our disposal to provide for affordable housing. The tax increment financing district is probably the most robust, but also we are hearing quite a bit from the state and federal level, even at some of the foundations that are out there, that there may be money available at different levels of government that would be provided to cities that have trust funds. So while we don't necessarily have an initial deposit that we're going to make, because we have pooled TIF dollars, we have HRA levy dollars, we have those funds within our budget. We're going to keep those within our budget. Just supplementing all that with an additional trust fund, which just gives us the opportunity in the future to receive funds from other entities. You could at a future date choose to put some of those dollars in a trust fund, but that's not necessarily the purpose. It's just the ability to get other matching funds that may come in. Again, something that was strongly recommended by the Housing Task Force. There are a few neighboring communities that have recently done the same. Not all, but it's somewhat of a newer trend we're seeing in neighboring communities of ours that are setting up these trust funds. So again, you'll see in the packet the actual ordinance to set this up is just a few paragraphs long, and it requires a motion for a first reading tonight.
All right. Council, any further questions? This is coming out of our direction, but yes, Councilmember
Yeah,
Moran.
I have a question. So if one of the residents want to donate to this trust fund, is that will be tax deductible?
I don't know the answer to that, but go ahead, sorry.
So I think that that's always in the eye of the beholder in terms of what a tax accountant says. I've heard some say yes, absolutely, and others that question that. So I'd always get that person's individual advice. But there have been people, and I think if you remember, actually our previous city attorney made a donation to the city for housing. And I'm not sure, what he thinks the tax consequences are, but we have had residents that and prior employees that have donated to the city for housing that we could put in this fund. But it would be more straightforward if you were providing money to a 501c3. We're not a 501c3, but sometimes the foundation or other groups might set up funds. They could maybe. The foundation could set up a small fund. They could collect dollars from individual residents. They could write that off, and then that money could be put in this trust fund. But I can't say definitively it's tax deductible to a resident.
Since any donation to the city is not tax deductible, that we don't know that. Okay.
Yes.
Okay, so that's good. So the way to work this is to donate to like one of the foundation, like Eden Prairie Community Foundation, create a fund there, and then direct that fund to donate to the city, to do whatever the city want to do.
Correct. And it's my understanding, Councilmember Narayan, that's been discussed at the foundation level for the last year and a half. So I'm not sharing a new idea. I just came up with that as something that they're talking about. That's very clear cut from the individual donors' tax liability piece.
Yeah, because of 501c.
Yeah.
Thanks for the clarification.
Anyone else? If not, is there a motion to approve?
I move to approve the first reading of ordinance amending City Code Chapter 13 by adding a new section 13.04 establishing an affordable housing trust fund.
Is there a second?
Second.
Any further discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? All right. Okay, moving on to the last order of business this evening. Just for our residents' understanding and education, many of you know this already, that this city council has responsibility for one employee. We're what's called a statutory Plan B city, where we hire a city manager to run the city based on the policies, procedures, and directions that we give him or her. And so the city manager goes out and hires the 300 plus full-time employees, I think 300 more part-time, and runs all the, oversees all the various departments of the city. So our job as a council every year is to review our one employee and to then give an evaluation, a summary, and then to set a salary for that year. So that's our role. And so we do that in closed session because by law, anything that's confidential with employees, we need to do that. We did that at our last meeting. We went into closed session. We discussed with our city manager for a while his performance, and then he left the room, and we proceeded to discuss from our perspective how he's done and then to set a salary. So I'd like to read a statement that came out of that meeting. City manager's contract provides for an annual performance review by the City Council in conjunction with a salary review. At its meeting on March 1st, 2022, the City Council held a closed session to evaluate the performance of the city manager for the prior year. In the closed session, Mr. Getchell detailed the city's accomplishments in 2021 under his leadership, including completion of the race equity report, adoption of an inclusionary housing ordinance, continued sustainability efforts, and implementation of new technology. He outlined the continued financial and operational challenges that the city faced in 2021 as a result of COVID. He also discussed plans and goals for the next 12 months. The council then considered and discussed Mr. Getchell's performance, giving him overwhelmingly positive reviews. Each member of the council praised Mr. Getchell's excellent performance. They commented on his outstanding management and communication skills. They discussed how Eden Prairie is a uniquely well-functioning city under Mr. Getchell's leadership. The council then discussed Mr. Getchell's salary in light of his excellent performance review. The council determined to increase Mr. Getchell's salary to the amount permitted under the city's existing waiver to the governor's salary cap law. That's all state statute. We are capped to the amount, and to provide additional hours of paid PTO to be placed in a dedicated account that cannot be paid out until he leaves employment with the city, for a total compensation package of approximately $218,000. The council directed staff to calculate the actual salary and PTO amounts based on this guidance. So there's a motion that I'd like one of you to make, and then we'll vote on this, to increase the city manager's salary up to the 2022 limit of $198,286.40, and then to provide that additional 210 hours of paid PTO into a dedicated account. Is there someone, I know I just restated the motion, but if there's somebody that would make that motion, and then second, then we can discuss, or you can add or make any comments you wish about Mr. Getchell's performance.
Sure.
Go ahead.
Okay. All right, I will move to approve an increase in the city manager's salary for 2022. Hold on, I need my glasses. To $198,286.40, and provide an additional 210 hours of paid PTO to be placed in a dedicated account.
All right. Is there a second?
Second.
So before I let I'd like, if you would wish to say anything, I just want to say that I've been around, I don't know, probably 20, 25 city managers in my last 3.5 years as mayor. And I know that we say a lot, we have the best staff, we have, the best council, the best city manager. We do have the best city manager in the state of Minnesota. There are some really good ones out there, and I'm not disparaging anyone else. We have an excellent city manager in the city, and he leads a group of people who enjoy working here and tell us that because they vote this as the best city to work in, one of the top 100 places to work in Minnesota, but it's the top city to work in. So that's powerful. When you have people that work here that love the city, then they serve our residents, and the way that they serve is so positive. So that's to Mr. Getchell's reflection on him. I also want to say I know that numbers can get large. I know some people think that any government salary that's high, or if the president's making $500,000, that numbers are large. City managers outside of the state of Minnesota, where there are not caps, Wisconsin, I believe, Illinois, Iowa, can make 50% to double. I mean, they're making $350,000, $400,000 a year. So we could be having a brain drain out of Minnesota if this issue doesn't get fixed by the legislature at some point. That's why we want to keep our city manager as happy as we're able to under the law. And again, we're capped. We appreciate that he works here, and we want to do all that we can to keep him. So if there's anyone else that would like to add anything before we vote. Yes, Councilmember Narayan.
Yeah, I just going to echo what you said, Mayor. It's, the way we find out is when we visit the other meetings with other cities, and the praise we get about Rick and Eden Prairie and our adjacent cities and conferences that we go to. So truly appreciate, Rick, that you work and you've done a great job. Just to add one thing, just the salary perspective, that if you compare that in a public sector, it's like a director level with probably $5 million budget versus Rick handling $50 million budget with a very complex scenario with the complicated COVID last 2 years. So the salary compared to out there, it's not that big.
Good point. Other council members?
Yes, I'd like to say,
Councilmember Nelson.
I'd like to say thank you to Rick Ketchow for running such a great city that people like to live in, people like to work here, and you also keep your council very happy. So it's a skill. And
that is a skill.
And very few, cities have the luck of having the type of city manager that you are. And we do appreciate it. I know our citizens appreciate it. And we need to state it publicly.
Councilmember Freiberg.
Thank you, Mayor. I want to just thank Rick I find him many times, and it's my 4th year on the council, of being a good anchor. You're not only a good leader, a good communicator, and that comes from conversations with the staff. You truly are the best in Minnesota from exposure that we have. And I want to thank you for always taking the time, which is important. Many times we have to think on our feet, and something comes up, boom, out there. We don't have the answer for it. You're always available. And if you can't reach you and I leave a message, I know you're going to call me back, and I greatly appreciate that. Thank you very much.
Councilmember Toomey.
I would just like to say thank you. Thank you for all of your hard work on behalf of the employees, and it's always. I'm the new one here, so I've probably called you with 20 questions that you're like, oh, what is she asking me that for? But it's great. He's very good, and I just really appreciate it. So thank you so much.
City manager has an interesting role in that he or she, their job is to do the bidding of the council. So we direct them, they go out and do it. At the same time, we're not professionals in the work of running public works or police departments or fire safety, and he needs to be all that. So he needs to also be able to tell us when he thinks we're wrong, to advise us on which way to go, to actually be helpful and supportive of us. So he's got that interesting role, and he does a great job. It's a hard position, and there are some people that do not do it well. Rick is one of those that does it excellently. So, all right, with that, all those in favor of this annual review and the salary for the year 2022, I believe it's the rest of the entire year, I'll say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? All right. Thank you, Rick, for all that you do. So I believe that is all the business to come before the council tonight. Is there a motion to adjourn?
Move to adjourn.
Second.
That was quiet.
Yeah.
It's very. There's been a motion very quietly said, and second, all those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? This meeting is adjourned.